Welcome back to the Imperial 80s. I'm two mates. Good to be with you today.
Good to be with you too, Jay. Hope folks are out there doing well.
Yeah, absolutely. So this week we are doing The Running Man, the 1987 version. There is a 2025 version that comes out later this week, and
Yeah,
will
Friday.
be, I think, quite different actually than this version, based on what I've kind of read preparing for this episode. But anyway, it's the second Arnold Schwarzenegger movie that we have done. The first one being
Mm-hmm.
Predator. I still feel like this is not quite fully an Arnold movie, but it's more of an Arnold movie than Predator. Like it's like Predator is more of like an ensemble cast, whereas like
Yeah,
this one, he's definitely more the vehicle for this film, I think, um than he is in Predator. But you know,
but for
it's
Arnold
yeah,
stands, this is like a big one.
yeah. I
Weirdly,
get
I don't know why, but like we'll get
well,
into
first
that.
of
But
all, like yeah, to be an Arnold stan, I think is a very particular orientation in life. But um all right. A couple of things. One thing on the other platform that I've recently started up everything else with Jay yesterday did an episode where we had Jared Ball, I Mix What I Like, on to talk about Run DMC's first album. So for other people who are interested in 80s related conversations, check that out. We went for 3 hours yesterday and it was a good time. And then you have an upcoming conversation with him on within our gates
yeah,
as well.
yeah, that'll be dropping on Friday, Wednesday for patrons. Yeah, Jab and I chop it up about the Black August project that happened in the hip hop project. Um, the underground movement of like the 90s going into the aughts. We chop it up about a lot of stuff and kind of thinking about um all the different kind of facets of the underground that were happening. And it's actually really the part one. We actually talked for a while and realized that we had a lot more to kind of dig into. So yeah, we were gonna, it's a good convo. Yeah. Check it out on Within Our Gates. If you're patron on Wednesday, you'll get it. And Friday for the public.
Yeah, and like one last kind of content note is that we plan to have another bonus episode for this conversation, which should be pretty funny because it'll be us and Hiram laughing at Arnold Schwarzenegger clips. And so that will be on the Imperial 80s Patreon first and foremost. Eventually it'll make its way over to the other ones. But yeah, there's a link in the show description if you want to become an Imperial 80s patron and support this show directly. So we encourage folks to do that. So before we introduce our guests, make sure to do the like, share, subscribe, welcome people in here. I'm sure this will be a fun conversation this morning. And so, yeah, do all of the things. So folks know Hiram Rivera. I hope this is not his first appearance on the Imperial 80s, nor is it his first time on Millennials, but he's an organizer and popular educator with over 20 years experience working on issues of education, justice, carceral abolition, and political prisoners. He's led local and statewide campaigns in his native New Haven, Connecticut, New York City, and Philly. He's been an organizer trainer for the past 7 years with the School of Unity and Liberation, or SOUL, in Oakland, and the George Jackson Organizing School, which he co-founded in 2023. He's the former executive director of the Philadelphia Student Union and co-founder of Black Men Build, and he currently serves as the founding director of the Community Resource Hub, a national organization providing research, training, and technical assistance to groups across the country running defund and police abolition campaigns. And all of that has absolutely nothing to do with why he's here today. So just want to welcome Hiram back to the show, man. It's good to see you.
Good to see you guys. Good to be back. It's always
Oh
fun.
yeah.
Always fun.
Yeah. This gonna be fun.
Yeah. So I guess I start with like early memories, first impressions of this film. Hiram, why don't you start us out on that? Like, what was your recollection, and you could broaden it out a little bit to maybe, because I know you have broader reflections on Arnold in the 80s. Maybe you could say a little bit about that and where this sits in the pantheon of Arnold for you in the 80s.
Yeah, so I'll start there. My dad was a big Arnold Schwarzenegger fan. The Arnold movies, definitely Conan the Barbarian. I talk about this on there's old videos of me from 2003, 2004 on YouTube, me talking about my dad's affinity for Arnold Schwarzenegger and Conan and how it helped my dad I don't know, come into adulthood, I guess. And so we used to watch all the Arnold movies that came out. And I talked about this before in the last Imperial 80s, where that was the time of the VCRs and you could record movies when HBO used to show the movies, right? So it come on the big screen and then a year later it ended up on HBO and my dad would record all of them. So we had Blockbuster Video in my crib, right? With all the videos that my dad recorded. And of course, Arnold was there. And so 87, I was 10 years old. The Running Man comes out. And so I saw it as a 10-year-old kid, right at the peak, the beginning of hip hop's golden era, right? Like Paid in Full is out, Top Billin' is out, LL, is out, Public Enemy, and then The Running Man came out. And what I remembered of The Running Man before rewatching this movie was that I thought it was whack, and I didn't like it. I was used to Arnold and those other movies like Schwarzenegger too, like the muscles, the machine guns, the kind of like the military stuff. My dad was really big into military movies too. And so we'd watch a lot of those. And this was just way too weird in that 80s projection of what the future was supposed to look like. And everybody's in spandex. Everyone is kind of like just weirded out. And I was like, I don't understand that. I didn't rock with it. And then I rewatched it for this show and realized, yeah, I still don't rock with it. It's still whack. And so that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at. Glad to be here.
Oh, much appreciated. We'll have to play, since you brought it up, we'll have to play a little bit, give folks a taste of those YouTube clips. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I remember watching this movie on television. It probably was like early 90s, I guess, when I would have watched it. I did not see it in the theaters, but it was probably one of the I'm trying to think of other Arnold. I mean, I definitely was a big kindergarten cop guy. Like that was my shit. So, I mean, then it also speaks to age, right? Because like I'm probably 8 or 9 years old. I think I even saw that movie in the theater. And so this was not the first Arnold Schwarzenegger film that I watched. And I would agree, it's not one of my favorite movies of his. I don't, we did Predator already. I think I like Predator a lot more than this movie. It was kind of interesting in the era. And I think this is one of the things that we'll talk about a little bit with this film, is that because of the sci-fi elements and the kind of dystopian future elements and some of the technology at the time, which of course now looks really like, kind of rudimentary and weird that they're saying this is the future, but it looks like you're on a Commodore 64 from like 1985 or whatever. That, that stuff in that time period, would have did seem futuristic to us, right? And so I think that's interesting to talk about. And also it's funny that the film is based with the future that they're in being 2017. So like they're talking about something in the future that we're already like 8 years ahead of at this point, beyond at this point. I also, just as a side note,
and Jared, real quick, in the book, the future's 2025.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah. So that's the interesting part. And one of the things we'll talk about is the differences between the film and the book, which I did also read the book in high school. I've talked about this before, especially with Mtume, but like I went through a big Stephen King phase where I read almost like a bunch of his books. And some people don't know this was a Stephen King book because it was written under the pseudonym that he used at the time, which was Richard Bachman. The reason that he used that pseudonym was because publishers didn't like authors to release more than one book per year. And he was so prolific as a writer that he wanted to release 2, sometimes 3 books a year. And so he would publish other ones under different names. And so The Running Man is produced or is written under the pseudonym Richard Bachman. And he hated this movie so much that he wouldn't let them use his actual name when they were promoting it. And so that's another point. It's quite different than the actual book in a number of ways. And, we'll talk about that a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I my impressions of it as a kid, I think I don't think I thought it was whack or hated it as much as you probably did, Hiram, but I also was not super impressed by it. It wasn't a movie that I like went back to a lot to rewatch, or it was kind of one of those things of like, if it was on, then I might not turn it off, but I wasn't like super into it. And in the rewatch, I kind of, it's not the most engaging film to me in most of the parts. There, a lot of it is, well, I'll save some of my commentary, but it feels very much like a wrestling movie to me.
Yeah.
Like it has other professional wrestlers. I mean, I know Arnold's not a professional wrestler, but he kind of, he's in the bodybuilder, like that whole kind of space. And there are wrestlers in the movie and him, and I think that that's kind of, it has that kind, it kind of is marketed, in my view, to that audience a little bit, like people like the pro wrestling sort of audience. And as a result, like, it kind of is a little bit clunky because it's like, is this a dystopian sci-fi, like, critique that's going on here? Or is it like this campy sort of pro wrestling movie where you're just creating this situation where you can have these like kind of fights between Arnold and these wrestlers, basically, right? So yeah, that's enough for me up front, but yeah, I'm too me.
Yeah, for me, I can't say the first time I saw it. I definitely saw it pretty early on, because one thing I do remember is I saw Total Recall right when it came out for some reason. I went and saw it with like my dad in the theater. So that was 90, right?
Yeah, I also saw that movie before I saw this one too. Yeah.
So I remember by that time, and I had already seen a few Arnold movies, but I was like, when I was 10 and Total Recall came out, I was kind of hooked onto watching like Arnold movies. So I, around that time, found a way to watch this. And I had heard of The Running Man already. And I was also, I think by the time I was like 10 years old, really into the idea of dystopia, right? So I was like, I think it's just very relevant. And I've said this before, I was very much a kid who thought about nuclear war when I was like 8 or 9. Like the Space Shuttle Challenger fucked me up. All those types of things were like very much in my brain when I was a kid. But on the flip side, and kind of similar to y'all too, when I saw it as a kid, like I remember I didn't like attach me, like I wasn't like attached to it. But my assumption was that it went over my head. Like I wasn't smart enough yet. Like it'd be one of those things when I get like smarter as like a 15-year-old or an 18-year-old that I would get it, right? Because I remember all the like the nerdy kids that I knew who were a little older, or even like the hood kids who like nerdy shit. You know what I'm saying? Like Sean P would say, like, right? He would always talk about that. They would talk about The Running Man and all that, like, like it would get brought up. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm not there yet. My knowledge ain't there yet. I'll watch it at some point and I get it. I didn't watch it for many, many years. And I probably watched it before this, but in Trump's first era, right, in like 2016, 2017, it was getting invoked a lot about when he, because of like a person who was on TV, who was like a celebrity tycoon, this and another movie that we have to do, The Dead Zone, were some of the movies that would get referenced a ton. So I was like, well, let me watch The Running Man and see if like, if there's any like legs to these kinds of like connections being made. Not really, other than in like superficial shit. And then also I watched it and I was like, this movie's awful. Like, it's not really good. Like, this movie's actually not good. Even to like campy or the standards of like watching it with some kind of, understanding that it's not a great movie because of the time that it's made, but even on a certain level, it's just not well done. Like, and we'll talk about it. Like, it's just not well put together on so many levels. So I kind of had pushed it and I was like, yeah, Running Man, whatever. Watching it this past week, something hit me about it. And like, it even made me kind of have to reevaluate how we think about dystopia and like who like dystopian fictions are like really marketed for. Because I'm watching this thing and I'm just thinking like, oh, this is like, a libertarian's like, dream scenario, of their self-actualization in weird ways, right? And I'll talk more about that. And like, I was watching it and I was like, everything here is very superficial. Yes, there's like bits of content that I could throw out and say, well, that's similar, so forth and so on. But there's no real meat to the bone. And then also, and this is probably going to be like my largest point, when you take politics and you take history out of everything, but yet you make something like about a future, what does that really provide people? And it just provides people to project all their shit into something, right? And I could see how certain, sections of the internet, certain sections of like reactionary politics will like look at the Running Man as like their, their example, because they can like implant all types of garbage in it because it's like open for that, right? But then on the flip side, I could also see why someone like Arnold, who's a reactionary at the very, like, at least, would be totally into this. This is like something that he would want to do. Like he'd be like, oh yeah, the Running Man, let's make this happen, right? So that's kind of where my brain had been going. But yeah, it's and then I'm gonna have some comments on like the remake that's coming, which I have not seen, but I already have immediate comments just because of the director and things that I've read about it so far.
Yeah, I also just like Paramount is a terrible company, like, and I know that this one is on Paramount and the one that's coming out is on Paramount, and Paramount is owned by one of the wealthiest Zionists in the world, right? So like, I'm not encouraging necessarily, if people haven't watched this or are thinking about that, for people to support it. I do want to say that. But Toomey, maybe you could talk a little bit about like just the some of the figures that are involved in the creation of this film. Yeah.
So first, I mean, I think Jay could talk more about the novella by King, right? So this is originally a novella by Stephen King under his pseudonym. One of the producers, George Linder, his story that he says is that he picked up the novella one day and he's like, this could be a great movie, right? And I haven't been able to find like the process of which he went through it. What's interesting is the two main producers of the film are not like highly regarded producers. They're not like, one of them was actually one of his, I think, if not his first film he produced, it was like one of the first. So it was like they were pretty new to this. Even the production companies, they're not like highly regarded production companies. Like you can't find stuff that's like about them. One of them is a broadcasting company called Taft Entertainment Pictures. And yes, William Howard, like Taft, like the president, all that stuff. Yep, that's like the person. That's like that family. So there is capital flowing through this, and that's why you could get a movie. They could spend a ton of money, but they're not like it's part of like a part of the 80s, and I think we've talked about it, where there was these different kind of places of private capital making movies, and it was kind of an interest for them at that time. I talked to a friend about it, kind of about that, like there was in the 80s and sometimes through the 90s, you know how capitalists are. They're always trying to find different ventures. And in the 80s, like movies were still something that they thought would be a good place for like side investment or expansion of companies, that they were trying to build broadcasting companies as technology was growing, so forth and so on. So you have that kind of the thing. So One surprise I didn't realize is the original actor was supposed to be Christopher Reeve. He was actually the original casted person. And going closer to the original story, which Jay can get into, because what we see in the film of The Running Man is this cop who refuses to murder civilians, and thus he gets beat up by his own cops and they arrest him, and then he breaks out of a prison, and it's very choppy, right? But the original one, and I might get a little bit, and Jay or Hiram, you can help me. I believe he's a working person and it's like his child or something like that. He's supposed to do it to make money. And the original book, it's not a single place. So the film that we watch is like you go into this like single event space. It's actually really a cross-country kind of film. And the script writer, his name is Steven Souza, and he's a pretty prolific screenwriter. He wrote 48 Hours, lots of other movies. His original script is like that, and they plan to shoot that. But this film apparently is just riddled with like production issues, overspending. Reeve can't do it because they go into a shooting schedule for another movie. So they get Arnold in it, and Arnold's all the way, down with it. And apparently Souza wrote like 15 different scripts for it, which like isn't uncharacteristic of Hollywood, but it is a bad sign that your movie's probably gonna like tank in many ways, right? The original, they had a couple of original directors. They were gonna get get the guy who did the second Rambo film, right? He ended up not doing it. Then they had another guy that I think was up to like 2 weeks before the film was supposed to shoot, right? He ended up getting fired because of creative differences. I always love when you see creative differences in quotations, and that's it. Because I'm always like, oh shit, come on, B. Like, let me know what happened. Did someone throw the table up? I'm always
It's such a euphemism within the entertainment business. Like you get it in rap albums too, of like the group broke up, or like rock and roll groups, they broke up over creative differences. Yeah. It's like, like somebody fucked somebody's girlfriend or something. Like what is the story? Like,
It's like in the Udoka, right? With the Celtics. You're like, come on, B. We know some
it was a coke rage. It was the 80s. It was a coke rage. Somebody got coked out one too many times, and they were like, it's over, it's done.
It's over, done.
Creative differences right here.
They put the sticker on it.
Right. You back on that shit. That's what creative differences means.
So he gets ousted, and they bring in a guy named Paul Michael Glazer, who at that time, his most known thing is he was a Detective David Starsky and Starsky and Hutch, right? And he did some like TV directing. He later goes on to do a lot of like 80s movies that are like really bad that we all know. If you see him, go look up his name. You'll see tons and tons of movies that I don't even want to mention. They're just not really interesting, but you know them because they were on cable all the damn time if you were in the 80s and the early 90s. And he ends up being the director of the film. And like Schwarzenegger is funny. Like the little bits I found, he's very critical of him. He says basically the guy sucked as a director. He didn't really like do the right things, so forth and so on. They're like, no one seems to be in agreement that this movie is really like good, right? Like I think that they're like the cult of it, because there is a cult behind this movie. Despite that, they're very acceptant of, and I think that's a big thing with this kind of genre of movies. Like they'll accept the kind of cult behind it. But if you talk to them like straight up, they'll be like, yeah, this shit was kind of trash. Right? It was kind of corny. But yeah, it's riddled with production problems. I mean, some other key things like Richard Dawson, who from Family Feud is in it. He wasn't the original. They were going to get Chuck Woolery, which I can't imagine Chuck Woolery in it. Like Chuck Woolery would have been weird. Like I don't quite get that move to have him. Maria Conchita Alonso was another like big person to bring in. They were really launching her into movies at the time, these kind of action movies. She was like really getting pumped into as a person. We have to say the return of our homie Yaphet Kotto. He's now a two-time Imperial 80s actor, right? You know, you start doing the Yaphet balance sheet, and it's very weird. And another one that was really surprising for me is Mick Fleetwood of Fleetwood Mac. Right, I had totally forgot about that, and even when I looked at it, I was like, "Is that really who I think it is?" You know,
And he's basically playing himself too.
right, Mick. Right, like it's his
Like,
name,
and there's some he
right?
says something about like you didn't listen to my songs. Like there's some like
Yeah,
you don't
like an alternative history type of thing, right? You know, going into it. So I don't know, Jay. Do you want to talk more about the book to the film a little bit? Any kind of discrepancies, maybe things that are like really really important, and then we can start getting into the film.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is like, first of all, I'm not a big fan of Stephen King's politics, right? So like, it's not like this is one of the things about Twitter, unfortunately, is that it is exposed to the world, like all these people that we read or listened to or watched growing up that you're like, oh, this person's like really just a shitty liberal, right? And so um King is definitely in that camp for me. But you know obviously he wrote a lot. One correction, like this is actually a novel. There may be some shorter versions of it, but the actual original book is like 75,000 words. So it's full novel length.
Okay.
But a lot of the work he did as Bachman was novellas and like stuff like Stand By Me, Shawshank Redemption. Those initially were novellas that were written also under Bachman's name. And so, yeah. Key differences. So you're right about kind of the primary one, which is like, you know, who Ben Richards is, right? So in the book, he's impoverished, right? Serious money issues from a slum. He needs medicine for his sick daughter. I believe his daughter, I have to go back to this, but like his daughter, I can't remember if it's the same daughter, but like his daughter is basically a process is a sex worker essentially to be able to like make ends meet for the whole family, etc. So like it's a lot. This is the thing is like the book is much, has a much darker tone. It's much grittier, and it's actually more clear that there's like real class conflict going on. I mean, there are elements of that within this film for sure. Like there's food riots at the beginning, right? Which are what Ben Richards is being told that he has to execute all of the people who are in food riots. And he's like, basically, no, like these are just unarmed people who are begging for food. Like, I'm not going to do it, which is a wild scene in the movie, too. I will say, like, just all of these other cops, like, going so hard to like getting their butts kicked by Arnold basically in order to like enforce a mass execution of like what is it 1,500 people that are in Bakersfield, California, who are just like begging for food. And
Mind you,
that
I've
whole
been to Bakersfield. Bakersfield has still not recovered from that.
true. Yeah. um so like in the book, that like one of the key differences is that in the book he enters the Running Man game um of his own volition, right? So he's joining the Man game not as a prisoner, right, but as somebody who is impoverished, who wants to be able to, because I think the reward is $1 billion, like, so in the book. So it's actually more of kind of like a Hunger Games, right? Or like proto, that kind of thing. Like the idea is like everybody's poor in the future, and that the only chance for people to get out of that situation is to participate in this game show where you are likely to die, right? And if you win, though, you could get enough money to take care of everybody
Hey,
basically, right?
Jared,
And so yeah.
real quick, in the book, do they say how we got to this point? Because the movie just starts there. But I don't know. I wasn't reading books in 1987, but was
I
like
don't
started.
Yeah, I don't remember honestly on that point, and I could try to look up to see if there's like some summary of that piece. Um, yeah, I mean, the movie on it is very quick. It just has the opening screen of,
Right.
by 2017, television is controlled by the state. All art, music, and communications are censored. No dissent is tolerated, and yet a small resistance movement has managed to survive underground when high-tech gladiators are not enough to suppress the people's yearning for freedom. More direct methods become necessary, right? I don't actually remember how they set that up within the book. It's a good question. I mean, I know we'll get to this with some of our analysis, but obviously, in the context of 87, I think it's important to say that, like, most people watching this, like, this idea of a totalitarian society where people are broadly impoverished, where prisoners get sent to labor camps to do industrial labor, and where, the television is controlled by the state. This is going to be an anti-communist, idea, right? Like, and this, I think, explains a lot of as Mtume was saying, like, the appeal of this movie to libertarians, or the appeal of this movie to just people on the right more broadly, of, it's made obviously in the context of the Cold War. And I can't remember, I think that King's book was more critical of, like, a potential trajectory of the US, but, like, I don't remember that it was, um I think he was more critical of, like, the trajectory of US capitalism than it was, like, saying, like, "Oh, we're gonna turn into, a communist hell site," or whatever. But I'd have to go back and do a good reread to determine that. So, but just to say that, like, the understanding of class conflict within the book is definitely more present than it is within the movie, where, it's kind of like, okay, the Justice Department has taken over entertainment. And there's, like, this weird relationship where, people are watching this show that's on Justice Department TV, which actually, I mean, is interesting as, like, a critique of propaganda or whatever. But it becomes this kind of thing of state control is bad, censorship is bad, as opposed to just, like, capitalism actually is going to promote all of this bad shit anyways, right? Um, and so, yeah, I mean, other main differences, is that the yeah, in the game, in the book, Richards, it's the whole world. So it's not this, like, space. It's kind of what Mtume was talking about, is, like, you're trying to stay away from hunters, right? Who are trying to capture you as travel around all over, basically. Whereas in the movie, it's like a big game show set, essentially, that these guys are, like, dropped into, right? So it's all this kind of contained space. Um, and the other thing is Richard's basically being alone. And in the book as well, there's no, like, formal resistance movement, right? So it's like, it's not that's one way where it's kind of, the movie might be a little bit interesting in comparison to the book, is that, you know, well, at the end of the book, Richards, like, commandeers a plane, or actually, no, he becomes a part of the game at the end of the book. Like, he takes that offer to become one of the hunters, basically, and he takes a plane and he crashes it into the headquarters of the game, destroying the game in the book, right? So there are people that say, like, the book is actually more pessimistic in certain ways, where this is somewhat optimistic, because, you know, spoiler alert, but we're going to be doing lots of these. But in this, like, Arnold joins up with the resistance movement, right? Essentially, and, takes out the guy who runs the game. And they expose the game, right, to the populace. So there are actually elements of the movie that I think could be read as, you know, less pessimistic or more, kind of resistance based, for instance, than the book. But on the whole, it's just a very different treatment of, like, the other thing that gets raised a lot as the differences is, like, the campiness, the action basedness, all of this stuff. Like, the book is a dark dystopian kind of thriller that's not is not, there's not really any humor or any there's also not a lot of, like, set piece battles between the main character, and also because the main character is like a scrawny, like, sort of normal guy, it's not this, like, gladiator fight kind of thing that you get in this film. So those are, like,
Wait,
you
and,
know,
and that's how the
exchanges.
book ends. A scrawny guy hijacks an airplane and flies it into a government building.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. So
Like,
so basically,
this book's like The
yeah,
Simpsons, predicted
he gets
9/11.
he gets mortally wounded and crashes a hijacked plane into the games network skyscraper as an act of revenge, killing himself and the executives. Like, that's the ending of the book. Um, whereas, like, in this movie, obviously he joins up with the resistance eventually, and, becomes a part of their plan to expose what the game actually is, because people don't, just to be clear, I know we're, like, jumping way ahead, but people who are watching the Running Man game, like, it's like, UFC times 1,000. Like, everybody watches it, and they're locked in, and they bet on it, right? All of this kind of stuff. And it's a combination, really, of sports and, I guess, other types of entertainment, a game show. And so that's those are thumbnail differences anyways. But yeah, so anyways, we should probably move into the actual earlier stuff in the movie and so on.
Well, yeah, I mean, so we talked about, the film starts with this scroll of, like, the past, right? And Jay read it out about, the world has, reached this breaking point of scarcity and starvation and all that. And I forgot exactly what it says about, like, why it goes into a totalitarian state, but the word totalitarian is used, right? And I think that is super important, because when I was watching it this time, thinking about 87, and the way I think so many people by this point had read books like 1984, that became kind of the I think, like, the grand archetype of, like, dystopian societies, right? That kind of people, like, would, like, reference. And growing up, I was always kind of told that, like, the USSR was a dystopian society, like we actually had a dystopian society there. And then,
Right.
and on another time, I will say, some people said that about Cuba too, because of
Right.
Cuba's association with the USSR. So you have these totalitarian states, and then also, let's just not say the USSR, also the Eastern Bloc in general, right? We can add that into it. So, like, Cuba, I don't think I really heard about China that much personally when I was a kid, but I'm sure probably in some circles they would also throw China in there, right? Now, so you're getting this kind of thing that's, like, thrown into your head about what totalitarianism. And the thing that's really interesting is they want to use the media. Now, to me, this works in, like, 3 different ways. And one of them is this kind of mythology that, like, places like the USSR were, like, you were getting, like, Stalin pumped into your room like, every day when you woke up, you wake up and Khrushchev's, like, right there, you know what I'm saying? Or whoever was, like, was like the leader. And this is funny because a homegirl of mine once told me, she said something really funny. She was like, yeah, Americans, and she grew up in Romania. And she's like, Americans have this idea that, like, we were, like, just getting pumped with, like, mass media all day, while we were growing up. And she was like, no, I didn't experience this much media coming at me until I moved to America. She was like, America is the most, like, media pervasive environment that she had ever seen. Right. She said, like, this thing is, like, it's such a miscalculation of, like, what actually was going on. But on the flip side, what I found interesting is you get this idea of, like, television, and you're, like, immediately brought into it, and it's, like, mass media apparatus that does look in many ways very US like, especially when you get throughout the movie. And my brain, I was like, oh, it's supposed to be communism with American characteristics. You know what I'm saying? Like this idea that like we're on the brink and we can like slide over into a totalitarian state, but it would still look like something that we have, right? And this kind of concept becomes like the kind of overarching concept of the film, right? That we have this kind of totalitarian state that has these familiar characteristics, because television by this point is also a big part of our society, and the critique of television and the non-materialist critique of television, not the one that, you know, radical people were making, someone like Jared Ball will be making now, the radical critiques of media. It's not even like a McLuhan, you know, like critique. It's really a very like dry kind of like television rots your brain. It can basically get anyone to root for anyone else, and that becomes a big really twist of the movie, because you root for one, then you end up rooting for the other simply by some kind of identification. They're not really clear why that happens, but you get this kind of thing. And then you get Arnold, right? And Arnold's like flying a helicopter and he's a cop. Like you're very clear early on that Arnold is a cop, right? And he's with these cops, and he's patrolling this area. And like Jay said in the beginning, there is these like group of people who are hunger. There's like a hunger riot. They want food and all this type of stuff. And his bosses are like, yo, kill him. And he's like, no, in the very like Arnold way. When he says they want food, right? And then they all just go ham on him. But of course, he's Arnold, and he's able to kind of like fight him. And you know, they hang him out of like a helicopter, you know, and all that type of stuff. And you know, immediately you're identified with a cop being good, right? And these are the bad cops. Not that these are the cops. These are cops gone bad, right? And Arnold ends up becoming like the archetype of what good law enforcement or enforcement it should be equated with: egalitarianism, thinking about the people, so forth and so on. So they're immediately encoding you with a certain perspective, like really, really, really early, right? That like society has gone bad, the individuals have gone bad, but the systems at play, like they're not necessarily bad, they're just been distorted, which is like the complete liberal critique of fascism and any other kind of ism that they think is negative. It's like some degeneration of human people, not the fact that the state, you know, because that's the other thing to say, and we've kind of said it already. This film has no historical background, so it's like the things that I'm about to like say, it's like, you know, they don't even suggest it. Like the idea of what a state is not really put in there, and you're left to kind of implant your own judgments. So me and the three of us, as people who kind of know some shit, like you're like, I can't implant nothing, right? I can't implant nothing because I'm like, there's nothing really here, you know. I'll stop there if anybody. I don't hire me. I don't know if you want to add anything to like the opening and thing, and even go further if you want.
Let me just quickly answer the question Hiram asked a little bit earlier. Is like, from what I could gather doing some quick internet stuff, like the book also doesn't really talk about how we got there. However, it is clear that, you know, from what I could gather, it doesn't seem like the book was critiquing communism at all. It was actually saying like, this is going to be the trajectory of American capitalism. However, I think that a lot of it for King is also bound up in this idea of state control and censorship being this really, you know, evil kind of thing. But he was really concerned about class inequality developing through the like accumulation of wealth by a small group of people, right? So it's like, again, that's kind of typical, I would say, of King's liberalism, right? Is that it's sort of like you want to critique the, you know, how bad capitalism is in terms of, you know, you want to critique this unfettered capitalism and you want to critique state control or censorship, but, you know, don't really have any kind of, you know, theory or politics that would actually address some of those root issues that you're concerned about, you know. And so then it's, yeah. But anyways, go ahead, Hiram.
Yeah, I think, you know, when I rewatched it, what stood out to me was one, just how almost spot on the opening credits were. We're kind of like setting the stage of this police state with the yada yada. And I was like, yeah, check, right? Like how accurately it hit that. What I've always struggled with sci-fi. So as a kid, I was never, till today, I'm just not into sci-fi. I was never into dystopia. I thought it was dumb because it just the jump was too much. It was always too much, right? You go from 1987 to 2017, and now we're in like Flintstones age, and somehow all of civilization has collapsed to the point that like the basic stuff, we just don't know how to do basic stuff anymore. It's this weird thing, and I could never just wrap my head around that. Like, why does it have to go there? Another thing that stood out was definitely just how militarized the police were. So you can't tell whether they're soldiers, are they cops, are they some sort of new hybrid thing, right? Because the uniforms, the weaponry, which is kind of telling, right? This is where we're at. And if you're going by the book that it's 2025, it's like, yeah, society hasn't collapsed, right? The buildings haven't collapsed outside of Bakersfield, California, but the everything else in terms of like the talking to the screens, right? The heavy emphasis on these game shows that are these Hunger Games type things. It reminded me of the idea, I don't know how real it was, but when they were talking about families and people who are undocumented going through some sort of weird Running Man style game to get their documentation, like in this society, in today. The likelihood of us being willing to watch something like that, the likelihood of people in the US watching a game where people could be killed for sport or whatever. It's like, yeah, I could see that, right? I could totally see a large part of the country being down for that, especially if they are undocumented, if they are non-white, if they are. And so those things definitely stood out. What's always hard to wrap around is just that, where this collapse, infrastructure has collapsed. Everyone is living like mole people, kind of. There's this group of folks who are clearly very poor, right? So you have the cities where Maria Conchita lives, who, shout out to Maria Conchita, definitely top 5 crushes when you're like 10 years old in the 80s. Rosie Perez, Maria Conchita Alonso, they were up there. I hope she's doing well wherever she's at. But there's like this whole group of folks who they're placing bets, right? Illegal bets. And they look like workers. They look brown. They look sort of Latino with some poor white folks in there, right? But you don't know what is happening. Why are they there? And there was this very stark like class line that stood out. But what I've always struggled with the dystopian, to me, you talked about, it's about projecting your stuff on. It's like, I just need clear understanding. How did we get here? How did we just forget all of the sciences and knowledges of billions of years of history? Just has come down to this. I thought it was cool having Richard Dawson there as an actual TV host playing that TV host. Survey says you're dead. Shout out to the Wu-Tang Clan. But yeah, it definitely, the movie is, again, I don't like it, but I can definitely see a lot of it. I can definitely see a lot of today in that movie. And it's a trip just how, I don't want to say accurate it was, but how that forward looking was like, yo, this is where we're headed. And we're kind of like there. And we can't really see that, or at least the majority of the country can't see that because of the media you're talking about, Mtume, because of just how many screens and people are talking at us constantly, because of how many game shows and sports and things are just constantly thrown at us. Even these concepts of like manhood and the reshaping of all these things that we can't even see, we are pretty much there. It may not look like that and bombed out, right, to cause to really highlight the contradictions, but we're pretty close to what that movie was talking about, and without the spandex, thankfully. And I was just like, yo, that's a trip.
Yeah, so just to name off a few of the things on that list, in terms of like what do there's a whole group of people who are out there who are like Running Man predicted the future, right? Like that, and I mean, I always think that's interesting. I think that one of the things is that like tech bros are also often obsessed with sci-fi, and so then they actually try to create the things that they see in these movies, right? So it's
Yeah.
like it's kind of a question, and we've gotten into this, I think, a little bit in some of the conversations with Dwayne Monroe, right? Of like, you know, like even the marketing of these language learning models as AI, right? Like it appeals to all of the sci-fi brains of people who are like, oh, they were talking about AI in the 50s or in the 60s, right? And like now they're doing it. And it's like, well, no, they figured out a way to do certain things with servers, right? And they're marketing it as artificial intelligence because they know that they've created sci-fi has created this vision of that as like,
Mhm.
oh, we could have sentient computers and things like that, even though of course they're not, right? And I think that's like part of what you see in some ways in some of the effects of a movie like this is that, and sci-fi in general, right, is just that it's sci-fi is a creative form of fiction where people try to create, possible futures. And I think to the point you raise, Hiram, too, about like it is always, way off too in certain ways, right? I think a lot of the sci-fi writers imagine themselves as creating a warning for people, right? Like if we don't do X, Y, and Z, right, this is where we're going to go. And so they
Mhm.
intentionally distort as well what they actually think is the real trajectory of history because they're trying to like make a kind of heavy-handed point to people. And I don't know. The last thing on that point that I'll bring in is like Jay Mufawad Paul and Devin Shaw and Allison Escalante and some other folks. They wrote a book called Necrocapitalism: A Plague Journal During the Pandemic, and in that they talk a lot about dystopia, right? And like how we are in a dystopia, right? Like we actually do live in a dystopia, but that it is easier for people. This is a point I think that Mark Fisher also makes in Capitalist Realism to some extent, that it's easier for people to imagine a future that's really fucked up than it is for people to imagine a better future. Right. And like that's a problem that
Yeah.
we deal with all the time. Anybody of us that care are on the left and are trying to organize or are trying to shift people's ideas and consciousness about the world could be, that there's so much media out there that shows a future that's bleak,
Yeah.
right? And so like and so little media out there that shows a future that actually is a better world than the one we live in, right? And so this has this negative effect also on the imaginations of the populace as a whole, which is kind of interesting, right? Because that's the critique in some ways of a film or a book like this, is that entertainment is going to condition people into subservience basically, and just rooting for like individual people to get out, which is certainly what we see, right? But on the same time, it's like you're also creating a vision of the future that doesn't allow people to see like real possibilities of something other than like some nebulous resistance movement that's like trying to take out a game show basically, right? Or whatever. Like
And
so
to that
yeah.
point, real quick, right? There's that quote in the movie where they're talking, and he says, "Men don't run for president; they run for their lives." Right, and that kind of like just whole
Yeah.
giving up on basically everything you were just saying, but it reminded me
Yeah.
of that quote in the movie.
And the resistance has to be legitimized by a dynamic individual, because one of the things that happens is so after Arnold is arrested, he's put into this like labor camp, and they start with like their kind of immediate like breaking out of the labor camp, and he meets, he has like couple compatriots, actually more than two, a couple compatriots who they like basically do this, elaborate kind of thing to kind of get out with like these like digital monitors, and they can monitor people. One dude runs too early, gets his head blown off, yada 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 yada. Like, it's cute. The stuff is like not that interesting to me in terms of like the kind of mechanics of a lot of this stuff. It's very, very cute. But Arnold, you know, he's part of it. They go through, they're able to kind of liberate themselves and also liberate the other prisoners, and they get out of the camp. And when Arnold, they kind of go undercover into like society, trying to like run from, you know, the forces. When he gets and he meets the resistance, and one of the things that I always hate is that you never know what these resistance demands are other than resisting whatever is in control, right? And it makes this idea that resistance is just this kind of thing, right? And like, you know, at this point in my life, as three people here who deal with politics and organizing, we all know how much we're fighting against this kind of bland idea of what resistance is and not a specific thing. But also historically, it's just inaccurate, right? All resistance movements have, you know, political ideals, ideas, wants, they want to create new worlds, so forth and so on. So Arnold basically kind of just shits on him when he sees them. He's like, y'all are whack. Right? You know, like, and he also refuses. He basically says, I'm not going to join up on y'all. I'm going to go solo. Right? And that's kind of where it sets. You're identifying with like the solo actor. And to me, this identifies a lot of things, but and it's kind of to your point. A big thing about 80s movies, especially of this time, going a little bit like mid to late 80s, is there's a massive cynicism about what's possible in society. Even from people who want to hold on. They're like, let's get at least the status quo. So dreaming of like revolution, you know, is really leads you to authoritarianism on one level in some movies, right? Or, but like at best is keep this stable society that you kind of have, right? It's like Demolition Man, which I know is the 90s, but if you watch Demolition Man, like the big thing is kind of like, yeah, we know society was flawed, but it was better. The flaws is actually what made society great, you know, some that liberal weird shit that they like to use, right? So the cynicism that exists, and it really kind of feeds onto it. So you get to kind of accept that, you know, the only thing that can help you is really a charismatic individual. And then the one other point that I think that Hiram made that's so on point is that you watch a lot of this stuff and it is recognizable, right? But that's like the point of like Marx when he talks about like ideology. He says it's a camera obscura. It's not that like what you're seeing is not real. It's just upside down, right? So when you're watching a totalitarian state, and you get like, well, yeah, I recognize that. I recognize military police. I see them in my neighborhood every day, right? I recognize the media that's propagandizing me. I realize hyper violence on stuff. I get it. I see it all the time. But that's the point of the camera obscura. It's actually obscuring the critique and making the critique something that's either depoliticized, not politicized at all, or trending towards the right, you know, fascist or whatever. And that's kind of what happens. And that's what kind of what movies like this do. And that's why I think you get so many people who have really right-wing reactionary politics to love these kinds of things, because it's a camera obscura. Like, it's not saying that someone who's right-wing might not be right on a few points, but it's their solutions to the point is the issue. It's not the, you know, yeah, when someone from the right might say, you know, we live in an authoritarian state here in the U.S. I'm not actually going to disagree with them. You know, I said, but then I say it's monopoly capital, and they go, no, it's not that. It's not that, right? And then they go, okay, that's where we differ, homie, right? That's where we're not getting into it, you know? So yeah, I mean, this movie, it gets into that, like, so Arnold becomes the kind of centerpiece of everything. You're kind of like meant to identify with his, and it's so sloppy because I mean, I don't know how y'all feel, because I still didn't feel watching the movie that him fighting back had anything really to do with the people as much as it had to do with, right? No, right? It had to do with kind of just, he got tricked into it or got caught, and he kind of has to kind of get into it, you know?
Yeah, it was him. He got thrown into it, and he had to get out of it. The resistance is there. They're literally underground, but I don't know what they're fighting for. Right? I don't know what, like, you don't know what the resistance is resisting. You don't know what is happening in society, because again, right, Maria Conchita lives in this high-rise apartment doing her workouts and stuff. Everything seems chill, with the exception of the folks who are in the work camps or who are betting in the streets. But even still, right, a lot of folks bet in the streets. It doesn't have to mean something crazy. But you don't know what the running man is doing, other than they wanted you to massacre the folks in Bakersfield. You were like, nah, and you end up in this situation where they're trying to kill you, and you're getting out. And then it just ends like that, because even when they do win ish, well, they stop the show. Society, whatever created the show, is still intact. Is still there, right? But they killed the show host for everyone's entertainment, everyone's amusement, and it's just kind of like, all right, cool, right? And that's the end of it. And what tripped me out too, what always trips me out in the 80s movies, is why are the grandmas always so bugged the fuck out? Right? Like, when on the show, the ones who are betting and the ones who are cheering the hardest for the death and the blood are like women with like, from the 80s, where's the beef grandmas, which was a thing, right? The whole, like, Wendy's, where's the beef? I'm like, yo, why are these old grandmas really? And it was that bugged me out a little bit. I was like, relax, yo, this is crazy. Because you see like the runners, and then the audience is just old, like the folks, you know what I'm saying? So there's not a lot of kids in the movie, there's not a lot of young people in the movie. It was just, yeah, that was a trip. That was a trip to me. But you don't know what they're resisting. And Arnold is just, and Arnold doesn't want to be a part of the resistance. Remember when he like breaks out of jail, he hops on the truck and he's like, I'm gonna go be a farmer or something like that. I'm just out of here. And he's trying to find his brother. And then when his brother's kidnapped, oh right, his brother's kidnapped, right? He goes to the apartment, his brother's kidnapped or whatever, and then he like takes off, but he never finds his brother either. He just bags a shorty, right? And it's kind of like, all right, cool.
The brother was sent to a re-education camp, which is another like total authoritarian communism baiting thing.
But he never went and got his brother. He just like killed this dude and then was like, cool. And I was like, all right, but what about your brother, bro? And he was like, fuck him.
A lot of people have pointed out that,
and in his mind, he's probably still like, my brother probably deserved to be in that camp, because Richards has sent mad people to those camps, which is why the resistance folks are like, man, fuck, keep that bomb on his neck, because he's a cop. And they're like, nah, they're not all bad. My uncle's a cop. And there you go. Left his brother in a damn work camp.
Yeah, like the policing critique, I mean, it's just like the only good thing that Arnold does in the film is like not slaughter 1,500 people, right? Which is like, good, like great, but like, that's like, it's such he does that from a moral position, right? Of just like no, like there are people looking for food, like I'm not going to do it. What's wild is that I think that
wait, real quick, Jared. The reason he doesn't do it is because they're unarmed. He says they're unarmed. There's no weapons. Yeah. Had there anyone in that 15 had a weapon from the radar up, they would have killed everybody. But he was like, they're unarmed. What are you doing? Had they had a weapon, then it's a totally different ball game.
Yeah, absolutely. And the picture, I mean, so it's a kind of a funny scene too, because like, again, he's looking on this like computer screen that looks like it's like Centipede or something like that, and there's like these little dots on it, and somehow he's supposed to know that none of the people are armed just looking at this screen, and that's where it's funny too, is that it has the ideas of the types of technology that they would have, but it doesn't know how to actually visualize those, because it also is working in the constraints of 80s technology to produce what it imagines for 2017, right? And so, yeah, like some of the other quick things, I mean, so yeah, the cadre cola, I had that up for a minute, but like people were pointing that out, that's another thing, is like all the bad stuff in the film is like, again, kind of coded with all of the, like you said, re-education camps, cadre cola, etc., right? Like they're playing into the anti-communist thing for sure in the movie. The other thing that I wanted to bring up in terms of some of the stuff that people look at and say, oh, they predicted the future. So one is the rise of reality TV, right? Like and this is also kind of within the book, as well, obviously, is that there's kind of this, again, prediction, which of course there wasn't really any form in 87 of reality TV. Cause I mean, we could probably think about that somewhat creatively, but really, like, the Real World is kind of like, recognized as the first reality TV show. And I don't remember the exact year, but it comes out in the 90s, I believe. And, the big time reality TV takeoff doesn't come until like the 2000s, really. Um, and then, yeah, I mean, like, some people put like fake news and media manipulation. I mean, that's lazy to me because the media has always been like that's not something that came after this movie. That's something that was going on well before it.
And like movies had did that already too. Like Network had that critique in the 70s. It's like the original.
Yeah, I don't find that compelling from this movie. The notion of celebrities in politics. I mean, Ronald Reagan is literally the president at that time. So, again, like, that's not something that the movie is predicting so much as something that's already happening. And they're only really talking about it in the context of the game show host, being like this crossover, right? But, this is sort of like in the movie seen as a contract or an agreement between, this show and the Justice Department to, you know, to do something to which that part actually is interesting. It's not something people talk about a lot, but I do think that there is a critique of propaganda, right, that we could talk about with this film, right? Of this idea of like, okay, um we're going to create a visual of these people we want to villainize, and we're going to, distort that, for a purpose of making people like believe in our system of justice and so on. And we're going to lie about the actual facts too, of like what actually goes on, or omit those entirely, right? um there's the whole thing about corporate power and consumerism. Again, like in the 1980s, I don't find that a very, like, that was like the water that the 80s swim in. But the thing that they use is the stalkers. And I did want to clarify earlier when I said hunters, that's what they're called in the book. But the stalkers in the game, wear Adidas, right? Like, and so they're, so did Run DMC though. um, and yeah, I mean, widening wealth gap, sure. And then I guess the screens and the technology, and obviously in the beginning when they break out of the work camp, right? They're all wearing these collars that explode and decapitate them, and there's a disturbing / slightly amusing scene where a guy's like running. I don't know if Hiram has that queued up to memory, but oh, you do? Go ahead. You could tell it, Hiram.
No, go. So they've got them. They're breaking out. There's a whole plan that they've orchestrated. Arnold and the Resistance. They got to decode. They have to basically take down the system. There's like a radar sort of security system, kind of like a dog collar, right? That shocks you. Except instead of shocking you, it blows your head up. And they take it down for a hot second, but it's still being jammed. And in the moment, the guy, I forgot what his last name was, like Gonzalez or something like that, takes off running because now it's his time. They're like, no, not yet. But he's like, to hell with him out. And he's running. You already know what's gonna happen. He's like, no, get back. And he's just running. And there's one of the officers who has his own, suitcase set up, and he's jamming the signal, and he gets within like 2 feet of him, and his head blows up, right? And he blows up, and they're like, damn, stupid. And then they end up taking down the system, and they can run.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's interesting about it, right, is like it is kind of like the technology that they're depicting in this is obviously something that didn't quite exist in the 80s, right? And you kind of have like a Wi-Fi sort of idea, right, of like they're trying to take down a network that seems to be kind of virtually linked, not through cables or whatever, to these sensors or whatever that would trigger the signal on the neck collar to explode somebody's head if they run away. And so that, that type of stuff within the film, I think, is maybe one of the more, I don't know, it's interesting. It's not surprising either to me, though, that like forms of carceral technology, or the development of technology, would be used for these types of purposes under capitalism, and so I think that that's, again, also not, there's nothing in the film that I find particularly prophetic about the future, other than there are just things that we can look at and say, oh wow, that shit wasn't around in the 80s, and it is around now. But
they had the facial recognition technology.
The deep fake thing too. The deep fake thing
The deep fake,
I think.
the deep fake
Yeah.
on the
that was
video.
interesting. Yeah.
There was the Alexa, right? When Maria Conchita walks into her apartment and just starts telling the apartment to turn this on, do that, or like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But someone said something to me some years ago. They always said that, like, if you think about some of the consumer technologies like the Alexa, how much that was influenced by popular culture. So it wasn't not like so much a prediction. It's more like, well, we could do this, and we know this was in like popular culture shit, like the Jetsons, right?
Yeah.
Like I part of my thing is like I think reason people like Chat GPT is because everyone really likes a Jarvis and things like that are really popular in the kind of American or really Western zeitgeist of thought. So it's like, Chat GPT becomes attractive because it gives the mythology that you can have a Jarvis with you. And there's also the mythology, and with Jarvis is that everybody can have their own maid or butler on the side right there. Like,
I was gonna say, who's Jarvis? Who was Jarvis again?
Iron Man.
Oh,
yeah, it's Iron.
His digital
right.
assistant, right?
So I kept thinking of Johnny Five. I just got stuck with Johnny
But
Five.
even that, like how much these things, because these sci-fi writers create these kind of things, and then that becomes a part of like the public consciousness, right? Because with the deep fake thing, so for context, people who've seen the movie is, it's kind of skipping ahead, but they're in the game, right? Arnold gets in the game, and then one of the things that gets kind of switched on him is that he basically goes in the game because to not have his two friends go in the game, his two homies, who Yafet being one of them. So he goes into the game, right? And then Dawson, what's the character's name who plays the I always forget the guy who plays his the host of the TV show. He basically tricks him, and he sends his guys up in there. So they're in the game, right? Fighting in the game, and they do, and we can go through some of that stuff in a minute. But eventually, one of the things that's tricky is that like Schwarzenegger just keeps winning, right? He wins, he's so much better than all of them, right? And the other big thing is, as it keeps going, first they're kind of shocked, but then they're like, oh snap, he's kind of dope, and the audience begins to root for him, right? Because he's so dynamic and so forth and so on, right? Eventually, Maria Conchita Alonso's character gets thrown in there. Yeah, Killian, thank you, Steven. That's what his name is. Gets thrown in there, right? So they eventually escape, right? So one of the things is like the government's like, well, we can't let people know he escaped because they're going to like think this is like the best guy, and we're going to identify with him. They want to like cancel that identification. So they use like a deep fake technology of the face to actually show, is it Jesse the Body who does it, right? Jesse the Body Ventura's character killing Schwarzenegger and Maria Conchita Alonso's characters, and killing them in it and so forth and so on, right? And they use that. Now, what's interesting is this kind of goes into the communist baiting. My first real recognition of talking about deep fakes in like the more present is DPRK stuff. Remember when they were all saying that like DPRK was using deep fake stuff? Right. That was big in like the late aughts, right? Early 2010s. That like, I think he's dead, he's not really here, and all this type of stuff. that was one of the very first like deep fake consistent things that I saw. From what I can remember. So it's like part of that.
He did it with Osama bin Laden too.
Bin Laden too was,
right,
yeah, was another one.
That bin Laden had died years ago.
And that was a deep fake.
There was a body double and deep fake. Yeah.
Right. So it's like it's interesting how those things get locked in to the kind of public consciousness. And then the one other thing I'll say is like a reason why this movie also got I think like a rehashing during Trump, and I mentioned it a little earlier, was this idea that the entertainment world had access to government, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the big things about Trump that is not, I don't think it's not untrue, that Trump's celebrity, him being like a celebrity tycoon, is part of the reason why he was able to kind of nestle into, this position that he's in now. But there's a lot of other factors with that too. It's if you just use that, that's a very small kind of like critique. But the thing that like to me always makes it very, 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 very thin is that it's not just about some dude who's able to kind of do something for entertainment purposes. The state entertainment's like WED has far more to do with it has far more to do with a really complex thing of ideology. And this film has no real critique of ideology other than like grandmas get rabbit. And it's funny, Hiram, I never thought about that, but I have to think about my own grandma. And my grandma watched a lot of television. So it's almost like they're taking a pot shot at grandmas, right, who watch TV all day, right? That's kind of what I feel like. They're taking a pot shot at my grandmother who watched Knots Landing and Falcon Crest and Wheel of Fortune all the time, on ritual.
And it was the grandma that kicked off, right? She placed the bet on Richards, and then everybody else wanted to bet on Richards. And then that's when the show was like, no, we can't have them betting on Richards. That was the thing that kicked it off when the bets started coming in. Predictive sports betting and fixing games.
Which keeps happening. So another thing, just I'd mentioned the kind of wrestling connections in this film. There's a few people I just want to kind of like mention with regard to that. And these are the stalkers, right, within the movie. So obviously we've talked about Jesse the Body Ventura, which again, second movie in which two future governors would be featured together in Jesse Ventura and Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, that's the funny thing about talking about it, predicting celebrities in politics. It's like, well, here are a couple of them right here in the movie.
And Arnold's campaign was the running man, right? He referred to himself as the running man when he was running for the governor.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
So running man. A couple other guys, Professor Toru Tanaka, right? He is a professional wrestler, and was in what is now he was in the WWF, which is now the WWE. Then this guy Gus Reiswich, he plays, is it Buzzsaw in the film? So he is not a wrestler, but he was in the 1978 World's Strongest Man competition, right? So like in the bodybuilder kind of world with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Another one is this guy Erland van Lith de Jude or whatever, who's a Dutch American actor, and he was also an American wrestler. He plays Dynamo in the film. Somebody else said this, but I had the exact same reaction watching it of like, he's light bright, right? Like they literally just stuck like a light bright on his chest.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're like, look
hey,
at this.
Christmas tree.
That dude was an opera singer.
He was too. Yeah,
he was.
Yeah.
Is that him actually singing?
Singing.
Okay.
He was an opera singer. So he's a professional wrestler, but also a trained opera singer who ended up dying of a heart attack a few months after the movie was made. So that's technically his last musical, right, performance or whatever. But he was also one of the Baldies in the movie The Wanderers. So everybody talks about the Warriors, right? But there's a whole other like gang movie called The Wanderers that was the shit with the Ducky Boys and the Baldies, and he was one of the Baldies.
Yeah, few folks are talking about Jesse Ventura. Jesse Ventura's politics are interesting, and he at one point was for a brief period of time on a Green Party ticket before dropping off of it. But he does have some pro-union. He also, I think Musa Springer actually told me that he was the first elected or first governor in the United States to oppose the blockade of Cuba, right? So like some interesting stuff. And he also had a show on RT America for a while, which is how Musa got to meet him. But yeah, anyways.
He's a Navy SEAL, right? He's also a Navy SEAL. Like,
yeah. So interesting guy. Definitely his politics are definitely, you know, more left than like Arnold or somebody like that for sure. But also, you know, I think people who were under his governorship in Minnesota would probably have some valid critiques, I'm sure.
I think he got kicked out of WWE for trying to unionize too. Right?
He did, yeah.
He's got that beef with Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, Hogan ratted him out. Fucking Hogan. All right, other stuff in the movie, like other scenes.
I mean, did we mention Jim Brown?
Right, Jim Brown.
I mean, that's like the other big one. So one of the stalkers, and I wonder, did they change the name Stalkers because of Tarkovsky Stalker? I don't know. Let me think about it. I'm curious. That's interesting. But anyway, is Jim Brown, who basically, like, you know, he's watching it. So you have these like different fields of people watching it. You have like the kind of people in the studio audience. You have people who watch it outside, and then you have this like little party of like, you know, higher class people who were watching it as well. And you see Jim Brown up in it with this weird ass like dyed haircut.
The original Wesley Snipes haircut. The original Wesley Snipes haircut.
Exactly. So at some point, Jim is just like, look, I need to get up in here. Like,
right.
Richard's just capping off my peoples. Dude just getting, they're just weak. I need to get out of retirement. Because is he retired also, or he's waiting? He's waiting to get called.
No,
up?
I think he's he was like towards the end.
So he gets called up, and he has like this huge like flamethrower, right? You know, and he gets up in there, and it's funny because Jim Brown's another one of these interesting people who, you know, I grew up thinking that, you know, with this like idea that Jim Brown was like this super radical person, and that was like one of the things that I was like told very, very young, and then as you get a little older and you begin to read and you heard about Jim Brown's character, you know, you learn a lot of that stuff, you know, is not as solid as as you would have liked it to be. But then also that he would do movies like this. He was really into this kind of certain type of media representation and media kind of you know, indoctrination of himself within it, right? Because he would do these kind of like reactionary style movies that I don't think he would think is reactionary. He would think is like, you know, exciting and lots of high energy and so forth and so on. So yeah, he's definitely another one of the people that's in it. And you're right, Jay. It's like it becomes this like athlete, strongman extravaganza, and it's totally baiting. Because I mean, was Jim Brown ever in WWF for a minute? I'm sure he made a WWF. No. He never did like an appearance, like a guester or anything. No,
I'm way too serious for that. Way too.
He wouldn't do that. But I'm saying, but it's still part of that kind of like large, like athlete, you know, strongman, muscle bound culture. I'm sure when they told Arnold Jim Brown, he was like, oh yeah, man, Jim Brown, and he probably gave him a call. Like it's like this fraternity of musculature, you know, of athletics, right? And testosterone that can kind of get thrown in. And it is like when you're watching the movie, it's like it's testosterone city. Like the action actually isn't very good.
No,
everything feels a step slow when I'm watching it. I'm kind of like, no, like the way that it kind of moves, it's just not tight.
To the point about the testosterone. So when they get right, because remember, Richard's boys, his two boys from the Resistance, they get thrown in as well. So there's three of them that go in, and that's when they introduce Sub-Zero, right? The giant hockey playing Asian dude, which was hilarious, right? That's just hilarious. But he takes Weiss. Remember, Weiss was the skinny white guy, and he gets like knocked down or whatever. and then dude is like skating with him, like he turns him into a hockey puck. And he's like skating with him, and then slap shots a whole human man into a hockey goal. And that was the only dude who wasn't like ripped up and all muscular, who just got turned into a hockey puck real quick. And son goes full Wayne Gretzky with a human man, right? And slaps him into a goal. Played that man crazy. That's probably one of the most disrespectful things I've ever seen in a movie. That was insane. But the other disrespectful thing in there is that like Sub-Zero turn Asian dude, right? Turns opponents into bloody sushi. I was like, there it is, the racism from the 80s. Immediate cut to a random woman in a kimono at that like upper class party. I was like, let it Leonardo DiCaprio. I was just like, boom, she's just in a kimono serving food. I was like, that's wild. Epic.
Oh man.
I mean,
Absolutely. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was saying, I mean, we could open this up to the other thing with this movie that exists is just like how much they lean on the Arnold like one-liner. It's like way too, it's like it is so overdone in this. It's like they had no other ideas. And also, I also could imagine, because the other thing with Arnold is he's particularly bad in this movie, in my opinion. Like he doesn't really, you can see his real lack of range in this film. So I could also imagine that they struggled because he was still trying to find his way. I mean, remember like Terminator, he was still kind of, you know, Predator is like credited as like one of his first real life. And this is the same year too, I think, right? As Predator, right? So they're still trying to find a way to really how to make him an actor. They don't really know how yet. So their idea was like, well, let's just give him quips throughout the entire film to kind of like start a scene and then bookend a scene when someone dies. Like before he like, you know, gets at somebody, they have to give him a line to kind of like let you know that this dude is whack, right? And then after he beats them, you know, he needs to give you the button line. And you're just waiting. Go ahead.
Dude, like Sub-Zero, Plane Zero.
Yeah.
Scene.
That's what I'm like, okay. It's just so much. I'm like, y'all really gonna do this? And you start expecting it, and it's terrible.
Yeah. One thing too that sticks out for me in these 80s movies is that all the bad guys are always on dirt bikes. There's some sort of correlation between like dirt bikes and bad shit, like terrorism or killing, right? The bad guys are always on dirt bikes. And bad guys always have that like ski last name. I don't know if they're Polish or Russian, but the bad guy is always something ski, right? Like who was it? One of the bad guys. It was the chainsaw guy, Buzzsaw. Buzzsaw's original name was and he was on a dirt bike. And I was like, yo, this is wild 80s. They're always on dirt bikes. They always have these kind of Polish last names. I don't know what any of that means because I was only 10. I still don't know what it means, but it happens all the time.
What happened to Buzzsaw? Oh, he had to split. You know, like it's just like
wait. So Buzzsaw, for those of you who haven't seen the movie, we can ruin it real quick. Buzzsaw has a chainsaw attached to his arm. So all of these characters, I felt like they were made for toys, right? Because the toys we played with in the 80s, they had these weird, they're like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle villains is what they were, right? These guys are Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle villains because even the cars, like souped up go-karts with stuff, motorcycles, like it's like, yo, you're trying to sell toys. This movie is basically to sell us some toys eventually of all these folks. He has the chainsaw arm. He's like, it's attached to me. You can't take it off, right? And then Arnold comes like, yeah, let's attach it back to you and saws them in the nuts. Can I say nuts on YouTube? I can say nuts on YouTube, right? Saws them in the nuts, right? And then like splits them in half. But Buzzsaw's like, and then at some point his voice goes much higher to let you know he hit the guys, right? And I was like, y'all are corny. But it was that was split in half.
It was, I was actually having this discussion because my oldest wants to go see the new one, right? And I was talking to my wife about like whether our youngest could go along, right? And I was like, it's rated R. We probably shouldn't. And then I was like, oh, but the old one's rated R too. And I was like, why was it rated R? And then I was like, oh yeah, he saws his Johnson off. Like that's probably what got it, you know.
And then Enzo had to split. You motherfucker. 'Cause
It's just filled, man. Like if you go through like the way the movie is structured, like it's one of those things where you realize Arnold and like Keanu Reeves, it was like the Keanu Reeves thing in The Matrix, which is very true, that they restricted his lines. Like he doesn't have a lot of long paragraphs. He has like maybe 2 to 3 lines at most, right? In like a succession. He does, all the long speeches are given to Larry Fishburne and others. They would restrict that. So like you see that in this movie, they still need you to identify with him, but they have to just give you these like constant quips. Like what's the one he says to Killian? What is it like? What is something like? Oh no,
I'll be back. He does that. I'll be back.
Right, but then Killian does have the good one, only in a rerun, which I like. But there's the other one he says to Killian, where he's like, I don't do you bastard, drop dead. I don't do requests. Like
No, my favorite was when Weiss, clearly the nerd guy, right, who's jamming signals and all that. He's like, oh, it's the TV thing, right? We have to jam the network. And then Arnold goes, jam it up your ass. Unnecessary, right? We're all trying to get free. Yo, wait, you guys remember why Maria Conchita ended up what they said she ended up in the game for? Like her crimes that she committed?
Oh yeah, that's wild. I mean, yes, if you have like an actual listed out, but I remembered that last night. I was like, oh really?
So she gets arrested, or she gets caught stealing the original footage from the helicopter camera, right? That's catching Arnold being like, I'm not gonna kill unarmed civilians or whatever. And the reason, as part of the manipulation, the reason they give for her being in the game was that she was what was it? I think she was like bootleg or buying like bootleg stuff or whatever. But the main crime was that they were like, and she has had sexual relations with 2 to 3 men in a year. Send it to the. I was like, oh shit, okay, that was it. In 1987, they were like, yo, 2 men in 1 year. Jezebel. Send her to the hockey rink. I was like, okay. This is crazy.
Yeah. I was looking, there wasn't a toy line, and it'd be interesting to know if that was just like it didn't do well enough, and whether that like what the reasoning was that there wasn't. But I agree with you in terms of like that it that's the way it feels, right? Is like a movie that's just again like be marketed to the wrestling fans. You create these little action figures, like all of that. There was a video game, but it was not like they didn't manage to get it on Nintendo. So it was only on like Atari and Commodore 64. So, anyway.
And it became one of those games that I think was like rumored. Yo, the Running Man game is coming out. Yo, it's going to come out. It's going to be dope. I mean, do you remember that? People remember that in the 80s where like, this is like, pre-internet where it was all word of mouth. Somebody said somewhere that I want a Running Man video game. And then the perception becomes...
They had the video game magazines that would tell you the games and the month that it was going to be released. And then you just like circle it for Christmas.
And it's like variety. Someone just said it, right? It's not an actual development. So you begin thinking that Running Man is coming out as a game, and it's been canceled for like years, right? But I never actually saw the game, but I remember like wanting like a Running Man game. Like, oh man, that could be really dope,
You can go on YouTube and watch the full playthrough from 1989. So,
oh my gosh,
but it didn't make it onto Nintendo. Like, I mean, I actually did play Commodore 64 games growing up, but we didn't have that one. So,
You're too busy reading books.
Yeah.
This man said, I read the Running Man book as a kid.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what else.
I was older by that point.
How old?
I was in high school. Like high school was my Stephen King phase,
That's
you know.
what's up. That's
So
still nerd shit though, Jared, but it's cool.
I am a nerd, man. I don't shy from it. I wouldn't be here talking about The Running Man with y'all if I wasn't a nerd. So.
I mean, I was a nerd for the movies. That's why I saw stuff like these, and then I would see all the other little, like, you know, sub movie that was like this, the really whack, you know, the Running Man, you know, version that's supposed to be better, but it's not really better. It's just equally as bad.
Nothing wrong with reading books as a high school student. I encourage all young people to read as much as they can.
I would encourage people not to read Stephen King and to read, you know, some Marx and Lenin and Cabral and Mao and, you know, other stuff. But
again, remember, it was 1987 for me. I was like jumping on dirty mattresses in vacant lots. That's what we did back in the day.
All right, I'm gonna queue up. Which one should I'm gonna queue up some Hiram, some classic Hiram for folks.
Oh yeah.
Oh shit.
Oh yeah.
All right, where do you start? All right, I'll do here.
This was like 20 years ago.
That's a good question.
Wait, Conan, what is it? Conan the Barbarian or Conan the Destroyer that the camel sneezes on him? You remember that part? There's a scene, I think it's Conan the Barbarian. It's Conan. And the camel comes and goes like, and spits on him. And it's just like snot, like camel snot. So he comes and he punches the camel and knocks it out. Boom! And just dropped it. Mud. All he had was mud to fight this alien hunter that had like this nuclear bomb capacity. Like he got his ass kicked by Arnold, right? And only one man can knock down a tree with no saw, pick it up and tie ropes on it and like make them swing and set booby traps. There's only one.
Yeah, how the fuck did he do that?
How brute force. Brute force, the man, he's brute force. I didn't like The Running Man. The Running Man was weird. Like, you know, and where's our contestant now? Like, I don't care. He's in a giant man in a spandex suit. That's whack. Because you're Conan. You know what I'm saying? Conan don't wear no spandex suits, man. You know, that's horrible. Horrible. You couldn't do it. You couldn't do it. After, because he had Conan, right? And then he had the Predator and the Terminators, and he had it on lock. So the only other big time tough guy was like Stallone, and only because of Rocky, right? But Rocky would get his ass kicked all the time. Because in none of Arnold's movies was Arnold ever getting his ass kicked. Like Arnold started the movie beating somebody's ass and finished the movie beating somebody's ass. And if he didn't win that movie, he's gonna come back in the next movie and beat your ass. You know what I'm saying? That's the difference between Arnold movies and everybody else's movies. It was like you kidnap his kid, you kill his family, you kidnap him, you're getting your ass beat. You know what I'm saying? Once you see like the biggest man in the world kill everybody, it's like, you know, everybody else doesn't compare. You know, you got so Stallone stuck to the boxing. Dolph Lundgren, you know, Drago. But it didn't work because you were still Commando, but you were like whack. Then you got, who's this Euro trash? The hell's his name? Apple Woman. Van Damme. The hell was that? Oh, Steven Seagal, man. Steven Seagal was like, I don't even know what Steven Seagal's deal was. Steven Seagal was like a good fella that took a few karate classes, and then it was just like, you know, walking around, That's another thing. Arnold never used martial arts. Arnold used brute force. Like just brute force. That was it. You know what I'm saying? There was no fancy splits and fancy wardrobes and mullet hairdos and all. Nah, man. It was just, you put Arnold versus Seagal Stallone and Seagal Stallone and what's his name? Van Damme. It'd be a wrap. I want to see that movie. Come on, man. Schwarzenegger for aliens. What can you say about that? With no lasers, no lasers, no Independence Day style spaceships and Will Smith. There's no nuclear bombs. You know what I'm saying? That was just straight brute force. That was just mano a mano. That's where I learned how to be a man. Watching all those Schwarzenegger films. Dum 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 dum.
Yo, that is amazing too.
Yeah, so real quick, I used to work at a youth media organization teaching high school students how to make video documentaries and stuff and organizing campaigns around those issues. And the film director that we had on staff who he was in charge of like teaching a lot of the stuff, he and his friends were having an Arnold Schwarzenegger film festival. And so he wanted to create like a little movie about folks talking about what they remember of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and that's why I was up there talking about Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh man, that's just gold. There's another one. We'll save it for when we do. we have you back to do Conan, and we'll save it.
Yo, definitely.
Yeah,
no, it's funny.
2004 with the Nas Illmatic. You know what I'm saying? Scully with the brim on him.
Love it. Yo,
people don't want to see.
I want to go get me one. I want to go get me one. I'm like, yo, man, them joints is fly, B.
You know 21 years later, I'm still sitting here in a black hoodie.
Come on, B.
Because you know what I'm saying, folks never grow up.
Yeah, NY Electric, we keep it like that forever. You know. But one of the things that Hiram, to your
Donnie
point,
should have came out with a Scully with a brim on it. That would have been the
right.
Missed opportunity. Came out with the Scully with the brim on it.
But he's also 33, man. He might be too young. He might not really get that. You know, he might not really get that. He might not really get that. Get an Onyx Baldy. You know what I mean? Get an Onyx Baldy. But to the point you said in the video, though, the brute force thing I think is so spot on, though. Like, no jokes aside. Because that's really what it's about. It's about a brute force kind of idea, right? Like he doesn't need karate moves. He doesn't need like whirlwind kicks and all this type of stuff. He doesn't need all the fancy stuff. No, he can beat you by the sheer just absolute power. And it's funny. There's a movie about a prison break with Burt Lancaster called Brute Force. And that's kind of what it posits. Like Lancaster has to break out of this prison with just like the absolute pure like strength of his will and his like not size, but like size of his character, right? And it's that same mentality when I'm watching like Arnold like break out of the prison in this one, like him and like Yaphet get into that fight. And Arnold just has the physique. I mean, even in the shots of him in this movie, they really go to like accentuate like how gargantuan he is. A lot of like long shots of him, like when he's in the airport with Maria Conchita, you know, like you can really see like these like long shots of him and like his staggering back and his like arms and all that. They really went for the brute force thing in this movie. They're like, dude, you know, we're gonna see, you know, that Arnold is like the man, the man of like the highest level, which then when he fights all these people with like cars, chainsaws, flamethrowers, Sub-Zero, you know, all types of stuff, they're no match for him.
None.
He's like, I can whip your ass in spandex, in some
spandex. That's how Rocky Balboa won his fight against Drago. Remember? And in the training, and his training was like, yo, you can't basically work out this dude. The only thing's gonna be is blunt force trauma. And so like he's gonna build like hurt bombs or something like that. He said something like that. It's like, but it's basically went back to that. It's just got to be brute force, blunt force trauma.
Right.
And I do think that this is connected to imperialism, actually. Like, I do think, especially the U.S. variety, right, which becomes dominant, you know, post World War II. Because you know, we've seen this in multiple films now in the 80s, right? This kind of like the people who are using the guerrilla tactics, right? That this is like unethical, right? That they're engaging in. I mean, now coming out of that viewpoint, you get the whole rhetoric around terrorism, right? Of like this idea that, you know, these people really just want to want to harm people and sneak around and do these kind of things, right? Whereas, I mean, even the first movie we did with you, Hiram, like had that kind of, you know, slant to it or whatever. But, you know, American imperialism is brute force, right? It is raw power. Like we will have the bigger bombs, we will have the bigger military, right? And so there is an ideological thing, I think, that is important. And it is, I think, very much kind of why Arnold Schwarzenegger is this like this figure in the 80s that's connected, you know, whether in Predator or other movies to I mean Commando, right, is a good example, right, of just like, you know, we will be stronger than these people and they can try all that shifty, you know, you can try kung fu or you can try this or that. It's not going to work because, you know, my muscles are bigger and I can knock you the fuck out, right, basically.
Yeah.
And I think that's like there is that piece, and I think that's the same thing that's happening with Stallone in Rocky 4 also is like,
Yeah.
look, at the end of the day, we just have to have more bombs than the Soviets, right? So that they can't take us out, you
Well,
know.
to your point, early this morning, I was in the laundromat, and the guy who works in the laundromat, he comes up to me randomly, and he's like, "Do you know what today is?" I'm like, "No." It's like it's the Marine's birthday. I don't know how many years, 200 something or whatever years of
250. Yeah,
250
my
of the
freaking
Marine
uncle
Corps.
sent me an email about the same thing. Yeah.
Right. And so he's like, look at the back of my hoodie. It's like, you know, Marine Corps. He's like, look at my sneakers. Blue and red sneakers that say Semper Fi across the side, like full on Marine kicks. I didn't know they had Marine sneakers and stuff. And he's telling me stories about it's an older black brother. Said he did 3 tours in Vietnam. And it was wild, right? Because he's talking about he wanted to go celebrate, go to the bar to celebrate, but he had to be working at the laundromat. But he was drinking his rum and juice. So dude smelled like rum and juice at like 8 o'clock in the morning, right? Thinking about his boys that he lost in Vietnam, right? And I was just like, you know, hopefully, you know, you can get out of here and go do you. But he talks about, to this point, Jared, he talks about being in Lebanon when they blew up the it was like the barracks or somewhere. So it was like the USS Cole, but the barracks or whatever, and how he was in that, right? He was in that, and there were folks were there, and they got blown up there, and that the response, he remembers the response to that was giving the okay to one of the ships off the coast of Lebanon. And he said that he saw the missiles coming. He said these little black dots in the air flew over them. It sounded like a train. He said we looked out in a neighborhood that was kind of like out in front of them, got hit and just disappeared. Right. And he was like, I've never seen anything like that. He's like, the whole neighborhood just disappeared after that, after they had blown up the thing. So to this point about like just demonstrating this brute force, this whatever, I had this very conversation with a brother early this morning who, according to his words, I'm not gonna, because then he also said he was also part of the invasion of Panama. And I'm just like, bro, you've been 30 years in the Marine Corps. I'm pretty sure you've been sent a lot of places to do a lot of stuff, right? But it was that theme of brute force, right, in his tricked out Semper Fi kicks and matching hoodie.
Yeah, and the thing with like 80s movies, because it's also like just will too. Like we have a stronger will. Like think about Die Hard, and we'll talk about it. Like John McClane, by his sheer will, is able to like destroy all these like high level, high tech conglomerate of like terrorists in a building, right? Or even when you get to like the third one, he's able to like thwart a whole city thing that cops can't do on their own, right? Like we have this. I mean, even in Top Gun Maverick, one of the most absurd things is that this idea that like the technological apparatus is actually stronger outside of the US, and that we have our advantages, our pilots are actually the most sophisticated. If they can just get their will to be great fighters, we can defeat this elaborate technological apparatus of a nation they don't name. And like I said, it's just this camera obscura of like the world that these movies from the 80s, they really like to obscure the things that are actually happening, but then also invoke this idea that whether it's like the Aryan ideal of Arnold, whatever they were doing with Stallone, what they would then do with like Bruce Willis and, you know, anyone, that there's some kind of also like emotional angelic quality around these people that just puts them at a higher plane.
Yeah.
And because at the end of the movie, what does he get to do even? And it's the other thing is wreck the movie. Suddenly he is able to kiss Maria Conchita Alonso, just gets the girl, because he was lied on and he saved you and all, and because they have her throughout the movie. Also, they're kind of she's so helpless throughout the movie, except towards the end, she's able to kind of help.
Towards the end, where she turns into Che Guevara and she's leading her own band of the resistance soldiers with machine guns. I was like, wait, what? You like this helpless damsel in distress 1 minute. Next thing you know, you are
Arnold just kind of his soul just kind of poured into her,
But she's playing she plays into that Nicaraguan Civil War revolutionary woman. I was like, wait, come on now. I see what yous are doing here.
It's so sloppy. It's so weird.
But remember all the villains who got killed, at the end, Richard Dawson says, let's remember them. They hold a memorial. They remember them. They died as patriots. And he says they died as patriots, right? And evokes this sort of patriotism thing again about these dudes. But by that point, the streets were already betting on Richards, and so it was a done deal. And then the movie ends when he throws him the thing, and he tells Richard Dawson, "Don't touch that dial." And then sends him on his way, and Richard Dawson flies, and he blows up, right? And then he blows up. So Jerry, you had that picture of the sign. You pulled up the picture of the sign, and he blows Richard Dawson out that thing, and he flies into the Cadre Cola sign right through the middle, right there. And then Arnold goes, "That hit the spot." Because the one-liners would not stop. They would not stop.
I mean, there's something particular, and I'm too you've kind of talked about this in past, when we did Predator, of Arnold was somewhat conscious that he really couldn't deliver dialogue, right? But I think they really leaned into, in a period here of oh, well then just do one-liners. We'll just do, just punchlines, right? Yeah, it's terrible.
You gonna get this work. It's like you gonna get this work. If he would have just broken the fourth wall and would have just looked at the camera and would have been that hit the spot, that'd make the movie dope. For every one line.
I mean, at that point, why don't they just do it? I'm go there.
They can do it now. They can go back and do it, right? Just have him and just turn and say the line. That'd be the shit. I'd watch that again.
One other point that I forgot to mention is, you mentioned Maria Conchita Alonso, there is the airport scene too, which is much earlier in the film. And this is one of the things that people point to also in terms of predictions, because, in 1987, if people don't know, you could just walk right onto an airplane. There was no security whatsoever.
Smoking a cigarette.
Right. But in the film, you have metal detectors and you have all this other stuff. And, so they kind of predicted the post 9/11, security regime in terms of that. I know. I'm just saying.
But again, shout out to Maria Conchita, because then the next year is 88 and she ends up in Colors, the movie Colors. Remember, she has that classic role with Pac-Man. I'm telling you, she was the shit. Back in the day, she was the shit.
We're going to be doing Colors.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Colors is a dope movie.
All right. Anything else?
No.
Any other important stuff you had on your notes, Hiram?
No, I think that was it. The main thing was that 80s villains like dirt bikes, and Polish last names, and I was like, I don't know what's up with that, but
I mean, I do think the Polish last name thing is a part of the Cold War, right? It's just every bad guy, like an Eastern European of some kind,
Yeah.
Right. The dirt bikes is always the one that I never understood, right? You have an M60 bolted to the back of an F-150, I could see that. Dirt bikes.
Well, next week's movie, the dirt bike is a huge, very disrespectful thing. When we do Delta Force next week, the dirt bike is a heavily used thing. Dirt bike with missiles.
The dirt, I'm telling you, the dirt bikes was a thing, man. The dirt bikes was a thing back in the 80s movies.
Growing up where I grew up, a lot of my friends had dirt bikes, and they went to like little. I mean, they would just ride them around because I lived in the country too. But like, they also would go to these little places where they made little like courses and stuff like that, and it was a big thing. And no, they were hicks. I mean,
sounds like a training camp, Jared. Sounds like a training camp to me.
Yeah. So yeah, next week I do. So Lara and Stephen Sheehy are our guests next week. They watched it last night, and I can't wait. They're gonna Delta Force. I mean, first of all, apologies to them in advance for forcing them to go through what is one of the most racist movies that has ever been made which is a high bar, but it gets there, so but yeah, we look forward to doing that next week and talking about Chuck Norris, who's another like super important figure to the dirt bike riders that I knew growing up. So
and I think it's our first canon movie.
Yeah.
And we'll really get into canon, which has such a purchase on our generation pretty heavily, and
the one last question, I don't know, maybe you all can answer that another point, was in terms of this resistance thing or whatever, was how much influence did that period, right, the whole BLA stuff of that late 70s, early 80s play into these concepts of these underground resistance stuff? Because it was happening around that time, right? At least the remaining remnants of that was still happening, of those underground groups here in the United States around that time. But
I think for certain people who grew up in that, like the Weathers and all that type of stuff, or the European terrorists, like the Red Army faction, all that type of stuff, I think it does hold in their consciousness for a lot of those writers. They would write about it, right? But they would always see it as like unprincipled or crazy or nuts or something like that. So there's that element. And then, but I also think some of it is like American Revolution shit too, though. I think some of it, for some of these people, like they see like the American Revolution as a resistance, or these kinds of distorted ways of looking at what like resistance groups they would maybe hear about in like somewhere like the Soviet Union or something like that. But we all know those are all counterinsurgent groups or color revolution things, right? So they're kind of like pulling that. A lot of these guys have really twisted politics, right? But yeah, I think that's kind of where it all goes. We could talk more about that. I could look into more of that. And some of you guys write about it a little bit too.
Yeah.
Like they say it, but they don't have any real affinity towards it, though, especially these guys writing it. At best, they would see it as unprincipled, and if they made them look good in a movie, it would be them actually like saying, well, this is how they would have been better if they did this, which is really fucking absurd. But actually, one thing I'll say though, or they'll totally obscure it, like Running on Empty, where like they kind of make them just people who like Running on Empty, and they totally like depoliticize them. Like they're like communist politics, Marxists, is totally left out of a movie like that. They're made into like some kind of environmental thing, which is kind of fucking absurd if you're gonna like reference someone like Bernardine Dorn and Bill Ayers. That just makes no fucking sense.
Right.
Yeah, Running on Empty is a movie we'll have to do at some point, because it is. I mean, it wasn't like a big movie, but it does this. It's one of those direct movies where they're like trying to make, it's the whole like they were idealists and they went too far, and now they're trying to get back into like that. But
and black people don't exist in that movie at all. Like there is no connection to like the black
folks barely existed in 2017.
Exactly.
There was like the one old head And then after that, there was nobody else. Like black folks disappeared. Which that's a whole other movie. Not to keep us here longer. That's a whole other movie. What's it called? Cosmic Slop or something like that? Or
Yeah.
is it that the aliens came to take the
Mhm.
black folks and the president had to decide, do you like
Yeah.
get this technology or give up your black people?
Yeah.
Wild. You never saw
Yeah,
that, Jared?
Oh
So it's a movie.
yeah.
There's an alien, there's like an alien, it's not an invasion. Aliens come, right? These giant spaceships come and they're hovering over the United States. And they're just there for like a week. They don't communicate, they don't do nothing, they're just massive. And then finally, they make communication with the president of the United States. So I'm sorry, spaceships like all over the world. So the whole world is like, oh shit, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? They communicate with the president of the United States, and they're like, look, we've got this technology from outer space that can make your planet be the shit. And they flex on them a little bit. Like they clean up the pollution in the ocean, right? Like that's light work. That's nothing to us, right? Just a little taste of what we got. He's like, so what do you want? Like, we want your black people. And they were like, for what? Just give us your black people. So now they have to wait. Like you got like 24 hours to respond or something like that. So now they're like thinking like, what do we do? What do we do? This technology, the world could be so great. It'd be amazing. And the person's like, what do we, whatever. And then they go, and then sure enough, spoiler alert, right? Spoiler alert. They're like, take them. And so they start rounding up black folks, and they're using paper bag tests. And there's a scene with a family where the mom is like really light skinned and the dad is dark, and the kids are like, varying shades. So their family's gonna be split up because they can't literally pass that paper bag test or whatever. And the movie ends with the scene. They're on a beach, and it's just hundreds of black folks in single lines marching onto the beach. And then the UFO beams is like pulling them up into the spaceships. It's like 20, 30 spaceships pulling them all up into the spaceships. And the president's like advisor or something looks at them and says, what do you think they're going to do with them? And he's like, I don't know. And the spaceships just take off. And I was like, oh shit. Okay. I think the movie's called like Cosmic Slop.
It's made by Reginald Hudlin. It was supposed to be a series and ended up being the only episode. It was on HBO.
That was bugged out. It was scary.
And George Clinton is like the host.
Right, because it comes. It's some.
Yeah.
That freaked me out.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing that I've actually want to talk
like,
about.
It freaked me out. I was like, oh shit, like this is too real.
Yeah.
But cool. Hey, y'all, thanks for having me on this episode. I really appreciate it. I'm still gonna put my hat in if you ever do G.I. Joe the movie. I want in on that. I'm not trying to be on the show all the time, but if you do G.I. Joe the movie.
No, it's always fun to have you here doing these.
And I promise you, I will bring back the Scully with the brim on it. But, you know what I'm saying? Y'all bring me on. I'll dress up like 2004 Hiram. Just, you know what I mean?
The thing about people of our generation is we all still have those clothes in our closet somewhere that we're ready to pull out when we need to.
I mean, real talk.
I got a bubble vest to put over this hoodie too with the
I still rock a bubble vest right now.
No, y'all know. I'm saying the viewing audience. The viewing audience don't know. Yipper don't know. Yipper in the chat don't know. But the bubble vest with the non-Scully with the brim on it.
Come on, B.
It
right.
ain't hard to tell.
Look forward to it. Look forward to future conversations. Very much appreciate you coming through, Hiram. This was a lot of fun. And folks, sign up for the Imperial 80s Patreon, and we will have a bonus episode for you, probably be up later today. So, all right. Peace, everybody.